Hello again. Welcome to week 2 of Introduction to Korean History. And this is where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, because if you do the reading, it may not necessarily help you understand what's going on in this very complicated period. I'm going to try to help a little bit with this video, but also you may want to do a little bit of supplemental reading focused on Old Joseon, as it's called, or Gojoseon. Going back to Dangun just for a moment, we should also note that in modern day, Koreans remember the birth of Dangun on October 3rd, and the celebration they have is called National Foundation Day. So Dangun is very important, even in the contemporary cultural identity of Korea. As we move on into Gojoseon, which officially was started by Dangun, this is really the first historic kingdom. So this moves us from prehistory to the actual recorded history of Korea, first in Chinese histories and later in histories and documents written by Koreans themselves. Historians call the original kingdom Gojoseon, or just Joseon, because that's what they called themselves at that time. And it could get confusing because 1,000 years later, we will have another kingdom named Joseon. So that's why historians prefer the term Gojoseon, or in English, Old Joseon. The term Joseon originally comes from two Chinese words, one meaning dawn and another meaning calm or fresh. So Korea is often referred to as land of the morning calm, and that phrase originally comes from Joseon. Some scholars refer to Old Joseon as Dangun Joseon, again, because Dangun is the traditional founder. They believe that Dangun must have been a real king, otherwise, why would they make up the name? And so probably he just lived much later in history than the original myth purports in 2333 BC. And he probably wasn't the son of a she bear who turned into a woman. Most scholars would probably say that. Unfortunately, as you can tell from our textbooks, not much is known about Gojoseon, or Dangun Joseon. It was probably a confederation of warrior clans rather than a centralized government at that time. Also, the Chinese didn't really care about anybody who didn't speak and write Chinese. They called them all barbarians. So it's very rare to have Chinese histories give accurate information about people who didn't speak Chinese at the time. The known history of Gojoseon begins when Dangun Joseon was conquered by a refugee military leader named Wee Man, who was probably Chinese. He established his own kingdom with a capital at Wangom, which is later known as Pyongyang. But he kept the name Joseon. He didn't change it. So his kingdom, his dynasty, he and his descendants are known as Wiman Joseon, after the person who started the dynasty. But he didn't change the name of the kingdom. Wiman also managed to gain control over several kingdoms in the Liaodong Peninsula, Manchuria and China area, and greatly expanded the original territory of Gojoseon. So a lot of Koreans take note of these times when Korean kingdoms ruled over parts of Manchuria and China. It's a point of national pride, of course. Maybe even a small desire to get back to that point again sometime in the future. But if we stop there for a moment and fast forward 2,000 years to the 1950s, North Korea, or the Democratic Republic of Korea as they call themselves, in their ideology, they claim to be re-establishing the original Gojoseon. Remember that Gojoseon territory included most of North Korea today, and the capital of Wiman Joseon eventually was set up at Pyongyang. And so it's a great historical foundation for them to call themselves the true Koreans. The North Koreans might say that about themselves. And they also often refer to themselves simply as Joseon, not referring to the later kingdom, but referring to the earliest kingdom of Joseon. But unfortunately, the Wiman Joseon kingdom did not last long. It only endured a few generations. In 108 BCE, the Han Dynasty of China conquered Wiman Joseon, and they set up a puppet state under its control. They actually set up 4, and then the Han Dynasty came to an end. There were several changes of dynasty in China, and in the process, one Chinese government came into being known as the Lilang or Lelang Commandery. This was a very important development culturally for Korea because the Lelang government survived several Chinese dynasties as a conduit of Chinese culture and education into Korea and trickling down toward Japan as well. Chinese language and literacy were adopted by the elite Han peoples, as they're called, of Korea. Nothing to do with the Han dynasty, but the peoples in that area are known as Han peoples. Remember that the river that flows through Seoul is called the Hangang, the Han River, talking about the Han people of Korea. And so the elite of the Korean society at the time adopted Chinese education, Chinese language and writing. And so now Korean documents written in Chinese, of course, begin to appear in Chinese libraries and therefore are available to us in history. Also, religion and philosophy, Buddhism, made its way into Korea during the period of government of the Lelang Commandery. The influence of China continued in Korea, in the Korean Peninsula, uninterrupted until Goguryeo conquered Lelang in 313 CE or AD. So it endured for hundreds of years, this Lelang Commandery government. And of course, when Goguryeo conquered Lelang, that began what we know as the Three Kingdoms period, which is what a lot of Koreans think of as the beginning of their recorded history. But we have to remember these other kingdoms because they're important for Korean identity later on. I'm going to stop here and let you digest. I'm going to try to provide a couple of helpful documents as well. Don't trip over the map. Just take note of where Lelang is because that becomes the center of Lelang Commandery. And then later on will be conquered by Goguryeo, beginning the Three Kingdoms period. But just ask yourself as you're learning about this period of Korean history that is little known and little explored, what do you think the ramifications of this are for contemporary Korean identity when the northern half of the Korean peninsula was the center of civilization and education, where Pyongyang was the capital of the empire or of the government? What does that mean for identity for what is now known as North Korea? What is now known as South Korea? Where do you think the South Koreans will find their identity? So that is something to think about this week as you study. Thanks.